The wind moved through the high desert like a living memory, brushing over the red earth and whispering stories older than blood. And in that wind walked Nantan Kai, an Apache warrior whose name was spoken with both reverence and fear across the frontier, a man shaped by loss, war, and an unbroken code that demanded strength above mercy. Yet even he felt the ache of something missing as he returned from battle to a land that no longer held his people whole. For the white fences crept closer every season and graves multiplied, faster than children were born, and it was on one such return that fate placed before him a girl who would change the path of his life and the legacy of his name. She stood near the trading post at the edge of the territory, alone but unbowed, her clothes worn yet clean, her eyes steady with a quiet intelligence earned through hardship rather than age. And though she was known as an orphan, she was no child, a grown woman of 19 summers who had buried both parents to sickness and learned early that survival demanded courage, not comfort. And when Kai first saw her, he saw not weakness but endurance, the kind that bends without breaking, the kind his people needed if they were to endure beyond his lifetime. Her name was Eliza, given by a missionary mother who died too soon. Yet her spirit belonged to no church and no flag, only to the earth that had kept her alive when the world had turned its back. And when their eyes met, there was no romance in that moment, only recognition, as if two survivors had silently acknowledged the scars the other carried. Kai spoke little, but when he did, his voice carried the weight of command and prophecy, and he told her she stood on dangerous ground, that men with guns and hunger for gold would not spare a woman alone. And Eliza answered him without fear that danger had been her shadow since childhood, that she would not run simply because the world was cruel, and something in her defiance stirred him more deeply than beauty ever could. Days passed, and circumstances forced them together when raiders attacked. The post and Kai defended it not for the settlers, but because the violence threatened to spill into Apache land. And Eliza saw him fight not as a savage, as the stories claimed, but as a disciplined protector who spared the innocent and honored the fallen. And when the smoke cleared, it was Kai who offered her protection, not as charity, but as a choice, and he spoke the words that would bind their fates with uncompromising honesty, telling her that his people were dying not only by bullets, but by forgetting who they were, that he needed a woman strong enough to carry his name and bear his sons so that the Apache spirit would not vanish into dust, and that if she accepted, she would never be owned, only honored. And Eliza felt the weight of that demand, not as a threat but as an invitation to belong to something larger than grief. Yet she did not answer immediately, for she had learned that promises were often traps, and so she asked him what place love held in such a bargain. And Kai, unflinching, told her that love was not a word he trusted, but loyalty, respect, and shared survival were stronger than fleeting passion, and if love grew from that soil, it would be real. That night, Eliza lay awake beneath unfamiliar stars, considering a future where her children would not be nameless or forgotten, as she had nearly been. And as dawn broke over the desert, she realized that her heart, long hardened by loss, was still capable of choosing hope over fear, and she walked toward Kai as the sun rose, knowing that her decision would change her forever. And as this chapter of legend closes, remember that stories like these live because you keep them alive. So if you feel the pull of timeless love and untamed history, subscribe to the channel and walk with us into the next chapter of destiny. They could endure in secrecy rather than glory. Their sons were born under open sky, named in both Apache tradition and whispered English, bridges between worlds that had long been at war. And as Kai held them, he understood that his demand had never been about dominance but about defiance against erasure, about declaring that his people would not disappear quietly. Eliza, once an orphan with no name to protect her, now carried a legacy that would outlive them both. And though love had not been promised, it had grown nonetheless, fierce and unspoken, revealed in small acts. The way Kai listened when she spoke, the way she stood beside him when doubt crept into his eyes. The legend of the Apache warrior and the orphan girl spread not as a tale of conquest, but of endurance, of two souls who chose responsibility over fear and built a future where none seemed possible. And as their story fades into legend, it leaves behind a reminder that the greatest love stories are not born from comfort, but from courage. And if this story moved you, if you believe legends still matter, support the channel by subscribing, because every subscription keeps these forgotten voices alive and ensures that stories of strength, love and legacy continue to be told. The union between Eliza and Nantan Kai did not begin with celebration, but with trial, for the Apache did not welcome easily, and a woman of mixed blood and foreign birth was met with wary eyes and silent judgment. Yet, Eliza entered the camp not as a guest but as a woman determined to earn her place, learning the language, the customs, the unspoken rules that governed respect, and Kai watched her not with indulgence but with expectation, for his demand had never been about possession but purpose, and he would not shield her from the truth that life among his people was harsh and unforgiving. Seasons turned, and Eliza proved herself in ways that quieted even the elders, tending the sick during a fever outbreak, standing firm when soldiers rode too close, and refusing special treatment even when exhaustion bent her spine. And slowly the camp began to see her not as an outsider but as a woman forged by the same fire that shaped them all. Between Kai and Eliza, something deeper than agreement took root, built in shared silence, in the way he trusted her judgment, in the way she saw the man beneath the warrior, a man haunted by the faces of brothers lost and the fear that his lineage would end with him. And when she told him she was with child, the news struck him with a force no battle ever had, for in that moment the future became real, fragile and fiercely precious. Threats closed in from all sides as the government pushed harder. Treaties broke like rotten branches, and Kai was forced to choose between endless war and the survival of his family. And it was Eliza who reminded him that legacy was not only written in victories but in the lives that continued after the dust settled. And so Kai made the hardest decision of his life, leading his people away from constant bloodshed toward hidden valleys where